Have you ever stopped to think about what it actually means to be truly strong? I mean, in modern culture, the answer usually comes with a whole lot of heavy baggage and, frankly, immense pressure. Well, welcome to today's Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating source that completely challenges our society's expectations. It actually argues that by looking back at ancient biblical wisdom, we can find a completely different paradigm for strength. And as you'll see, the source suggests this might just be the exact antidote we need to cure the exhausting pressures of our modern world. So, let's dive right in.
Right off the bat, the source material points out this incredibly exhausting trap that's basically built into our modern metrics of success. Think about it. For men, society often defines strength in just incredibly superficial terms, right? It's all about physical dominance or having a fat wallet. It essentially reduces a man's entire worth down to his gym routine and his bank account. And for women? Well, the narrative pushes this extreme, almost isolated kind of independence. The cultural standard tells us that a strong woman must prove she doesn't need absolutely anyone in her life. It's an overwhelming set of expectations. Trying to measure up to these impossible bars? Well, it's a lot like running on a treadmill that just keeps speeding up.
So, what is the fallout of all this? According to the analysis, buying into these superficial definitions has an inevitable and pretty destructive fallout. First up, it leads to sheer exhaustion. I mean, you simply cannot constantly prove your physical, financial, or hyper-independent superiority without totally burning out. But beyond just fatigue, it breeds inflated egos. And here's the kicker. When those superficial things inevitably fade, when money gets tight, or when people realize they actually do need help, it results in profound, deep disappointment. Ultimately, the source argues that this self-centered pursuit of strength fractures our connections with others, leaving behind a trail of ruined relationships. That intense focus on projecting strength literally strips away our ability to genuinely connect.
Okay, so if the modern standard of strength is basically just a one-way ticket to burnout and broken relationships, it forces us to ask a much better question. Then what is the definition of true strength? Where in the world do we find a standard that actually builds people up instead of tearing them down? To answer this, the source material pivots entirely away from modern metrics and dives into two distinct biblical character studies that attempt to just flip our modern definitions completely upside down.
Let's look at the first character study. It comes from a profound instruction written by the Apostle Paul to the early church in Corinth. He writes, "Be on your guard, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong." Now, notice right away what's missing here. There is absolutely no mention of physical muscles or financial wealth. None. The call to act like men and be strong is entirely anchored in standing firm in faith. It gives us a completely different baseline for what it means for a man to step up and be strong.
Now, to really understand Paul's instruction, the source notes that we have to look at what the actual fight was. Paul frequently reminded believers that their struggle wasn't some physical brawl against flesh and blood, it was a spiritual battle. When you're faced with immense life pressures or heavy opposition, fear and feeling weak are totally natural human responses, right? We all feel that. But in this context, true strength means rising above that fear by relying entirely on God. It's a powerful acknowledgement that the biggest battles aren't fought with physical might, completely shifting the focus away from muscles and money and moving it towards spiritual reliance.
You might be wondering, why was this message so incredibly urgent for this specific group of people? Well, it's because the Corinthian church was a community that was literally tearing itself apart. They were dealing with bitter internal divisions, they were being bombarded by confusing false teachings, and they were surrounded by severe moral decay. This is the real historical context for why Paul commanded them to be strong. Actually, think of it this way. These men didn't need physical courage to fight a literal army. They needed the spiritual maturity to stand up within their own community, face the moral rot head-on, and hold the line. They needed the strength of character to navigate a profoundly messed-up situation without losing their way.
Synthesizing this first study, the source concludes that the biblical definition of a strong man is, at its core, a spiritual warrior. It requires the deep fortitude to resist the daily temptation to compromise your convictions, especially in a society that might be attacking those truths from all sides. In this framework, a truly strong man doesn't need to dominate a boardroom or bench press hundreds of pounds to prove his worth. No, he just needs the quiet, unshakable courage to stand firmly on his beliefs when the whole world is pressuring him to compromise.
All right, so shifting gears to the second character study. If that's the vision for a strong man, what is the biblical vision for a strong woman? For this, the source takes us to the famous text of Proverbs 31, specifically verse 25. It reads, "She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come." Wow. It's just this stunning, poetic picture of a woman who draws her identity and her fortitude directly from God, completely ignoring the metrics that modern society tells her to prioritize.
While the world often tells women that power comes entirely from outer appearance, or from that ruthless, isolated independence we talked about earlier, this text contrasts outer appearance directly with inner character. The strength and dignity she's clothed in, it has absolutely nothing to do with her wardrobe or how she looks on the outside. Instead, her strength is an inside-out reality. She is firm, dignified, wise, and she fears God. It's this quiet, deep confidence emanating straight from her soul rather than some superficial shield that's just meant to impress or intimidate other people.
And this brings us to one of the most beautiful yet frequently misunderstood phrases in the entire text, laughing at the future. What does it actually mean to laugh at the days to come? The source clarifies that this definitely does not mean she lives some magical life oblivious to pain or hardship. I mean, that's just not reality. Instead, it means she lives a life that is no longer controlled by anxiety. To laugh here is the ultimate picture of courageous faith. It's looking at a highly unpredictable, sometimes really scary future, and smiling out of a profound sense of spiritual security.
So where does that kind of security even come from? Well, according to the text, it comes from trusting that God securely holds her life and her family's future. Think about how sharply this contrasts with the worldly standard of the strong woman having to carry everything by herself. In this biblical framework, she doesn't have to carry the entire weight of the world on her shoulders. She doesn't have to pretend she has everything perfectly under control. Her reliance on a higher power is exactly what the text argues makes her truly strong, because it's what allows her to face tomorrow with total peace.
As we wrap up this explainer today, the source material leaves us with a pretty provocative challenge based on these two wildly contrasting paradigms. Whose standard of strength will you choose to live by? Are we going to keep running on that treadmill of superficial demands, measuring ourselves by muscles, money, and isolated independence? Or will we explore this alternative paradigm of inner character, spiritual courage, and a deep reliance on a creator? It really is a fascinating contrast between two totally different ways to view our lives and our worth. Something to really chew on. Thanks so much for joining me to explore this topic today, and I will catch you in the next explainer.